Hi, welcome to the session. I am Ram. I'm a consultant and mentor for SAP UI5 and NetWeaver Gateway. So this is part of a planned video series, and this is our objective of this demo. So as part of this demo, I'll build a simple application that will display the list of employees. So at the end of the demo, I will show you this kind of output where the employee name is displayed here and the department name is displayed as a description. You can see this is the employee name and this is the department. Similarly, on the right hand side, we have to display the designation of employee. So this will be the output after this demo. So how do we do this? We shall follow the recommended Fiori architecture for any SAP UI5 application or Fiori-like applications. So you can, on the right hand side, you can see the architecture of the Fiori applications or SAP UI5 applications. So this is the standard architecture diagram which you can find in many places, and you can also find this in SAP UI5 demo kit in the developer guide section. So what are the components involved here? There are three components involved. One is SAP UI5 application. So this part, the middle one, is the SAP UI5 application code. And the next important part is gateway server, which holds or hosts our OData services. So the OData services are accessed from gateway server. And the final component is our SAP backend system or HANA, where data is residing. In our case, it is SAP backend system, where it's a built-in database. So what is the required environment? So along with this video, you can also give a try creating this application. As part of this video, I will also show the hands-on code. I will write the required piece of code which will make the application run from end to end. So if you're giving a try, so this is the required environment. So SAP backend system is the one which is required, and gateway server that should have been configured and activated for OData. And the next one is we use Eclipse as a IDE, the development environment. So it should have been installed with SAP UI5 plugin, and we should also have a connection to our SAP system from SAP GUI. I mean, the connection should have been added, and you should also have some necessary authorizations to T-code SEGW and for deploying SAP UI5 application from Eclipse and to do testing. Of course, you should also have some basic knowledge of SAP UI5, OData, and SAP. So what is the sequence of steps? There are three steps involved here. One is we create a table and fill it with data as a first step. And in the second step, we shall create a OData service. So in this OData service, we shall write some piece of code to expose this data as a OData service. And once we create that, we shall also test it to see whether it is behaving as expected. And as a third step, we shall create a small SAP UI5 application to consume this OData service. So the code will consume that OData service and display the list of employee details. So let's start with our first step. So this is our table which we shall be using in this demo. So the table name is Z employee basic, and this is our key field. The employee ID is the key field of this table, and employee name, employee type, employment type, designation, location, department, email, and phone number are the non-key fields. So this is our table which is filled with data. I will show you in SAP. Let me open SAP. I have opened SAP screen. I have logged into SAP. Let me go to SC11. Okay, so I am giving the table name the employee basic as we have seen in this slide. So as we have seen in the slide, employee ID is the key field and other non-key fields. Let me see the data in the table. Yes, so we can see the data. There are few records. These are sufficient. These records are sufficient for us to develop this application. We have the employee name, we have the employment type, designation, department, along with other fields. Let's go back to our slide set to see what is the next step. Okay, so we are back to the slide. So we are done with the step number 1. So this is our step number 2. So in this step, we shall create a OData service and expose this. So there are two parts in this step. One is create and exposing. So we shall go to T-code SEGW. The SEGW is nothing but gateway service builder. So here with the help of screens we can create the OData project and we can generate the runtime objects, and we can register this as a service. So in this step we shall create a OData service and expose this from gateway. So the procedure we'll follow is we shall go to T-code SEGW, which is called as gateway service builder. So here we can create a project. So what we shall do is there is an icon to create a project. So we shall click on it and we shall create a project, OData project. We shall give the necessary details. It will create the project. Then we shall create an entity type. So this is to point to our table definition basically, and the entity set is to point to the data in the table. And as the next step we shall click on something called generate runtime objects. So there is an icon here which you can see. So once we click on this, this will generate all the necessary runtime objects. So once we are done with that, we shall register this with the gateway. So we're actually registering the service here. We have not yet done any implementation, but we're simply registering and seeing whether the service is registered properly and it is accessible. Once this is done, we shall move on to the next part of this step, is to redefine one of the generated runtime object, which is data provider class. So we shall go to the respective method. In this case, we shall redefine a method called get entity set. So in this redefinition, we shall write some piece of code to select data from our table the employee basic. and we shall assign this uh, data to the return type, the output parameter, which is nothing but this ET entity set is the output parameter. So we shall assign the data to this ET underscore entity set parameter, which will give the data as a, whenever this OData service is called, this data is given as a output. And once we are done with that, we shall test it with gateway client. So in the same gateway service builder, we also have one way to test this OData service. Okay, let me tell you something. So this approach is called model driven development. So SAP follows model driven architecture for OData. So this OData, as you may aware, that OData is just like a web service. So the objective of a web service is generally to integrate two components of an application. So generally there is one client side application and the server side application. So this web service or OData service is in the middle of these two parts of the application. So since it is sitting in the middle, it should have some kind of, it is just like a contract. So it should give the clear details of what it is offering. When this OData is called, what is the output and how to call this OData. Something like, what is the input parameters and output parameters. So these are, the client wants to know the caller application, the client application may want to see what is the definition of this OData service and what is the output he will get when this OData service is called. Before going to the implementation, I would like to say something about this, the approach what we are following. So this is called model driven development or model driven architecture. So when we are creating this entity type and entity set using the gateway service builder screens, we are actually creating a model, an entity model. So this is lying underneath. So this is used by the OData service and also the SAPUI5 application. This model, the data model or entity data model, is the contract between the OData service implementation and the client. So here, when we are doing this redefinition of any methods, what we are doing actually, we are doing the development of the model what we have created. So the development is in line with the data model which we have created. So when we are saying get entity set, we are telling, when we are redefining this get entity set, we are telling that we are going to give this set of records, the table, the records in a table are given as part of this method. So let's get into the development. Let me open SAP screen. So here is my SAP screen. Let me open our SCGW. So here is our gateway service builder, and you can see couple of icons which are useful tools for us. So this will create the project and we can open an existing project. So this will to turn on and off the change mode and to check the project consistency. Whenever we make changes to the project, we can check whether the project is consistent, and so this will generate runtime objects. Now let's create OData project. I'm clicking on this. So here I'm giving a name to this project. Let me say the employees 1 and list of employees. So I'm giving the package name as temp. I'm clicking on this local object. So we can see the message, the project is created, and let me click on this and see it is checked, no errors. Now, as we have seen in the PPT, we shall create entity type. Create entity type. So what I'll do, instead of creating the table and its properties manually, I'll import it from our DDIC. So I'm giving the entity type name as employee, and in the above structure I'm giving the employee basic as my above structure name, and I am now leaving this create default entity set as checked, so which means by default it will create an entity set. I am clicking on next. So here we can see all the fields of this table. So I want to select all the fields. I want to select all the fields and I will uncheck this, and I'm clicking on next button. So here we can modify the entity type. So here we can give different names to these fields. This is our above structure, the field name as in the above structure, and this will be used in the OData service. For now I'm leaving it as is, but I will select this field as key field, the employee ID, and it is the same in our table as well. So now I am clicking on finish. So the message is entity type imported successfully. Okay, so it has imported the entity type from our TDIC. So I can see the employee, the entity type is created. Yes, so this is our entity type and this is our above structure name. And let's see. Yes, so the selected key field is visible here, sorry, and the other non-key fields. So what we can see here is the OData service or the entity type for this OData service. So any changes we make here will not change the table. It's only the definition is imported from the DDIC to this OData project. So the changes we do here is limited to this OData project. The backend table does not change. And we can see one more thing, that is entity set. So the name of this entity set is set suffix to the entity type. This is the default naming convention, and that is since we have left the bookmark checked there, it is by default created. When we are creating the entity type, So we had a checkbox whether to create entity set or not. Since we have left it checked, we got this entity set by default created. If we have a look at this, we can see the name of entity set and entity type name is employee. This is our employee entity type which we are pointing, and we shall keep this as addressable now so that it is accessible from outside. Now, as the next step, so since I have already created this entity type and entity set, I want to create runtime objects. So if I click on this runtime objects, this will generate all the necessary runtime objects. I have clicked on it, and so these all the details I will leave them as is, and I'm clicking on OK or continue, and let me give temp as my package name, and I'm clicking on this local object. So this is generating the runtime classes. Yes, so we can see the message that everything is fine. The objects are generated successfully. So we can see there are two model provider classes and data provider classes, and we have a service and model. So let me register the service. So this is a dummy object. So the objects are generated without any specific implementation. So without any custom implementation, these are generic implementation available for the application to run. Okay, so any custom code we have to extend it. Let me register before we go to the implementation. Let me register the service. So I'm clicking on this register. Okay, so I got this, and I've clicked on local object and pointing to the package, and I'm clicking on continue. So this is our technical service name, and we can see the registration status as green, meaning it is successfully registered. Now before starting implementation, let me check the OData service. What is visible when this service is called? I am not making any changes. This is the path of our OData service. So by default the format is coming as XML. The display format, I'm clicking on execute button. So this is our service document. In OData terminology, we call this as service document, OData service document. Here we can see all the entity container data. So that in this entity container, we have one entity set, that is employee set, which is accessible as part of this service. And let me show you the metadata. So how do we see the metadata? We change the URL. We shall add $metadata. So this will display the metadata document of this OData service. So in this OData project, we have created one entity type, and that is, this is the entity type. You can see employee, and we have one key field employee ID and all other non-key fields. So this is our entity type definition. Let me minimize this. So we also have one entity set. So this is our employee set is our entity set, and you know that all the entity sets are wrapped inside something called entity container. So whatever the entity set or the contain or association set or whatever you see, whatever is accessible from this OData service will be part of this entity container. Now let's move on to the implementation. I am going back. So for implementing, what we will do is we shall click on this DPC extension. I'm double clicking on this DPC extension. So let me look for a method called get entity set. So the employee set underscore get entity set. So this we shall redefine. When I right click, I can see these options. I am clicking on this redefine. Okay, so now I got some code generated. So here I will provide my custom implementation. What I'll do, I want to select star from the employee basic into corresponding fields of ET entity set. So what I'm doing here, so this ET underscore entity set is the output field. So this is exporting the data. So when this OData service is called and when this entity set is called, this ET underscore entity set is the output parameter or exporting parameter. So this will have all the data of the employee basic table. So we are selecting all the fields from this table and we are assigning to ET underscore entity set. Let me check this code. Okay. Of the error message says you cannot use internet. Okay, there is a small syntax mistake here. So we should say table entity set. So let me check it now. Yes, everything looks fine. Let me activate this. I'm activating. Okay, so this is activated. Let me go back. So we have done the implementation of OData service by implementing get entity set method of this OData service. So let us test this using our recipe gateway client. So how do we test the entity set implementation? So in the method name we can see that it is get underscore entity set, meaning we are using get method of HTTP, and let us select the entity set. So this employee set is our entity set. Now entity set is selected and get is selected and click on execute. Nice. So we can see the entity set. When we query this URL, we will get this output. Okay, so this output is we can see the employee set is queried and we can see multiple entries. So each entry represent a record in our database table, and each of these ID is also addressed with a specific URL. So we shall see this as part of get entity implementation. So get entity, get underscore entity will give only one record. In this case, get entity set is giving multiple records. So this is the ID field URI for this entry, while this content and M properties will give us the record details. So here we can see our employee ID, employee name, and other fields of the table. So this record details are available in this entry, and similarly other entries will point to other records. So these are the records of the employee basic table, and we are accessing this data using this OData service. The URL of this OData service is this. So when we call this OData service and this entity set name, will get this output. So let's go back. So our second step is also done successfully. Let's go back to our slide set. Okay, we have done our hands-on in the second step. Yes, we have successfully completed our second step. Let's move on to next step. Okay, so this is our third step. So in this step, we shall create SAPUI5 application. And from this application, we shall consume the OData service, and so that we can display the employee details in a list. So how do we do that? So we shall open our Eclipse, create SAPUI5 application. So we are creating SAPUI5 project, and we'll select the sap.m library, which is by default. We shall not change that, and we shall keep this checked, create an initial view, and we shall click on next, and then we shall select this XML development paradigm, where the view will be written in XML. So we'll be giving a name to that view, and once you click on finish, it will create an SAPUI5 application or SAPUI5 project. And this is a dummy project that is created. Dummy meaning there is no specific custom implementation. So we shall write some code to consume our OData, which is generated or created in the previous step, and we shall write some piece of code to display the employee details as a list in the view. So there are two files will make changes, that is employee list.view.xml. There is a typo here. So there are two files. One is employee list.view.xml, employee list.controller.js. So in these two files we'll make changes. So in the XML we'll create a list and add that to page content. So this is the piece of code which we'll write in the employee list.view.xml, and we shall use standard list item to display the employee name, designation, and department. And our list will point to the entity set of the OData. In our case, this is employee set. The entity set name is employee set. I will explain more when we are doing the code. And the next file is employee list.controller.js. So here we shall uncomment this onInit method, which is by default available in the controller when the file is created. And in that implementation, that function, we shall write two lines of code. One is to create OData model. So this model, OData model, will hold the data that is coming from our OData service. And we shall add this model to view. Let's see how it works. Let me open my Eclipse. So here is my Eclipse. As we have seen in this slide, I am creating one SAP UI5 application project. So what I've done is, let me go back. I'm clicking on File, New, and I'm going to Other. You can search for SAP UI5. So that will bring up the folder. So this I'm selecting application project, clicking on Next. I'm giving the name as demos list, and I'm keeping these things as is. So which means I'm going to use this SAP.m library, and I want an initial view to be created. I have clicked on Next, and now here I will say employee list as the name of the view, and I am selecting XML as my view type. I am clicking on Finish as nothing is there in the next screen. So here is the generated code as part of this SAP UI5 application project. I hope you are familiar with this. Let me just briefly run through the generated code. So here is our bootstrap script. So here we can see we have selected SAP.m library, and this is pointing to our SAP UI5 core libraries, and the SAP Blue Crystal is the theme which is used. And so this line of code says that we are using some resources, that is our application files, which are stored in this folder. So here you can see this is the folder. In this folder we have this employee list.controller.js and employee list.view.xml. Since we have selected an initial view, so that view is created under this folder, and that folder is added in this resources, local resources, so that these files are loaded when the application is loaded. Now in the next line we can see one app object is created. So sap.m.app with initial page as id employee list 1. So this is the id of the view. So here you can see this is the view id which we are referring in the app. Okay, so here we are creating SAP UI.view, that is we are instantiating this employee list view here and giving this id, and we can see the view name is demos list dot employee list. So this is the path. Employee list is our the view name, and demos hyphen list is the folder where it is available. And we are also saying that this view type is XML. let me check this. This Eclipse looks like hanged. Okay, so we are also telling that the view type is XML by giving this type information here, and we are adding this page object to our app object. So this will create the app object, and the page is added to the app here, and we are finally placing this app object onto the content of the body. So now let's go to employee list.controller.js. So here we shall uncomment this method, this onInit method. So what we are trying to do here is we don't need comma here because only onInit method and the function is what we need. So here we shall create, so here we shall implement two lines of code. One is, step one is create a OData service pointing to the OData. So we shall create OData model pointing to the OData service URL, and we shall add this OData model to view, to this view, meaning the view associated with this controller. So these are the steps. Let me comment this. So the step one, where OData model equals to new sap.ui.model.odata model, and in the braces we shall give the OData service URI or URL. So where do we get this from? We can get this from our OData. So the easiest way is click on this SAP gateway client and copy from here. So this is what our OData service URL. So I am copying it to here. So now our OData model is pointing to the OData service. So this dot get view dot set model OData model. So now with this step we are setting this OData model to the view as a default model. Since we are not giving a name to this model, this is available by default. Now let's go to the view. I have implemented some in the employee controller. Now I have come to employee list.view.xml. This is our view file, and this is the default code that is generated. And inside this page content, you know that page content is the aggregation for this page. Inside this content I'm adding a list object. List, I will say items. I have opened braces. I have to open the bracket, double quotes, and then items, and then let me close this list. I'll go back to list items, and here I will say slash and entity set name. So I want to get the data from this entity set. What is the entity set? So this is my entity set name. So let me select, copy this name, entity set name. So I want to get data from this entity set. So I should say slash and then entity set name. Slash will point to the root of the OData service. And here inside the list, I will give aggregation as items. So items is the aggregation for my list. And in this aggregation, I want to use standard list item as the template for this list. So standard list item is my template object. Here I will use title as the employee name for employee name field, employee name. So how do I know the field name here? The best way is you open this gateway client and go to the service name and then look at the metadata. So this is our OData service definition. This is metadata document of the OData service. So use the property names from here so that there are no typos. I'm using title and then info. So info is displayed on the right hand side. So here we will give the designation. And we have one more property supported in this standard list item is description. So we shall use this description to display department field. So this is our department field name, our property name, and I'm closing the standard list item. Here looks like I'm done with the coding. So what should we do? We have created one SAPUI5 project in the Eclipse. Okay, and in the code I am pointing to this OData service. But where is my project? It is now only available in my Eclipse. This is not yet deployed to SAP. So what I'll do, I will right click on this. I'll go to this team and share project. So this is one plugin that is coming as part of SAP UFI plugin. This is called Team Provider, which will allow us to share the project to our ABAP repository. Now I'm clicking on next. I will click on browse to select the connection. I'm selecting this connection, clicking on next, give the password, next. Okay, I want to create a new BSP application. Okay, my name of the project is zdemos_list. a demo app to display employees. Package name I'll give $temp. Repository object already exists. Okay, let me give 1 as a suffix. Click on next and finish. Okay, so this warning is telling one information to us, that SAP UEFI runtime libraries that are installed in Eclipse have a higher version 1.36 than on the server 1.23. So in my SAP ABAP system, I have 1.23 version of SAP UEFI libraries, whereas Eclipse has 1.36. So that is the warning. So if you are writing code in Eclipse and that is working locally, that may or may not run in the ABAP system. So ideally, we should always check by sharing the code to the ABAP repository whether it is working fine or not. There is one more way of ensuring that the code runs fine locally as well. So we can actually refer the version name in the index.html as part of bootstrap tag. I will show you that possibly in another demo, how to refer the version number. Let us now submit the file changes or the files of this project. So when I right click team and then submit, when I click on this, all the files that needs to be submitted, it is the same warning which we have seen last time. So these are the files that are not submitted to our ABAP repository. So we can have a look at the list of files. So for now, we can select all of them and finish. Click on finish. So all the files now are submitted to our ABAP repository. So this will also deploy the application in the gateway or the SAP system. To keep it simple, in case you have hub deployment model, you will select the gateway for sharing this Eclipse project. If you have embedded deployment, it is one. Both backend and gateway will be in one system. So in our case, it is embedded. So I have selected one same connection which has both. So now what I'll do, I'll select run as and run on ABAP server. Superb. So we can see the list of employees are displayed on the screen. So this was our objective and we have achieved that. Let me open Chrome and show you. So this is my, so I'm opening this page freshly. Nice. So if we go back to our slide, we can see that this is the kind of output what we wanted. We wanted to show the employee name here and the employee department and the designation on the right hand side. So we are able to display all the employees from the table. we can check with the table whether we have got all the records. So the number of records are 9, and here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 records. Perfect. So we have successfully created an SAP UFI application with OData where we are showing the employee details in a list. I have come back to the slide set. So this was the our end objective, and we are able to display the employee list. Hope you have enjoyed this. In my subsequent demos, I will show you more complex use cases. You can reach out to me for any kind of support. Thank you.